Very excited to be talking to my friend Teresa Joy, who is one of the most brilliant B2B marketers I have worked with and
Oh
has
my God.
some really unique superpowers, as we were just discussing. She is currently the VP of Marketing Data and Audience Strategy at a little company called SAP and is doing really interesting work, which I'm sure she'll talk a little bit about. But as far as superpowers go, one of Teresa's superpowers that I think is really great, and I will use this as kind of a jumping off point, is that based on some of the really interesting places Teresa has worked, from Dell to Six Sense, um, Teresa really has a very, very strategic point of view about go to market and what I would call like a data driven point of view on how a B2B company goes to market. And yet, because of the roles on the vendor side and on the brand side, really understands how that go to market has to translate into tactics. Um, and when we're looking at, at the state of the B2B CMO today, um, there are all kinds of challenges, both strategic and tactical. So I thought that might be an interesting point for you to jump off um, and maybe start speaking a little bit about how you see that challenge in today's market.
Thanks, God. First of all, thank you for the introduction. I would say it's a superpower, but it helps. It helps. It definitely helps. I think complexity today is a couple of things, right? And we've talked about it in the past, right? One, and there's four pieces to the complexity, right? So the tech stack is complex, and then there's so much consolidation in the go-to-market tech stack, and there's so much overlap now happening between even the sales tech stack versus the martech stack, and now we have a word called the rev tech stack. So if you think about it, that complexity aligns. Then there's also the belief, like I think it's even marketing still has to be really justifying what marketing does. So it puts a pressure on a marketer or a CMO on things which typically you're like, hey, are you revenue driving? What's the contribution? And we are still talking about that. The other piece of it is the data landscape for marketing has become so complex that if
Hmm.
you even have to answer that question, you really have to jump through multiple hoops, right? I mean, what, it's been 6, 7 years, we still talk about attribution. Everybody's trying to get to attribution. It's the holy grail of marketing.
Yep.
And if you talk to marketers or you talk to analytics leaders like myself, what they would tell you is not all attribution works, and it's hard to get to a perfect attribution model. And in the world of attribution, nothing is really perfect. So you
Yep.
don't have wrong answers, it's the decisions you take. So that increases, all that combined together increases the complexity of B2B marketing, right? And overlay it with things like, hey, we want to drive account-based experiences, and overlay it with buying committees, and then overlay all that with personalization, all the key buzzwords,
Yeah.
and you now have a very complex function to do and execute and then report out on.
Yeah, I mean, we hear this all the time, and obviously that's sort of the domain that the Imaginarium sort of plays in. So we sort of live and breathe that. How, I mean, starting with measurement, and omni-channel attribution is really just another way of saying
Yep.
sort of like thoughtful and considered measurement. The how, Have you seen, there are some incredible tools, our friends Octane 11, who are a part of this, who are, helping us with this report. And it's a tool that we really love a lot. But I mean, have you seen this stuff moving forward, right? I mean, everyone's been talking about attribution, again, like you said, since basically digital marketing began. And, it doesn't always feel like there's a lot of movement, although there is. But I mean,
Well, so this was a conversation we were having with our team this morning, right? We had a quarterly sort of the big update on tech and data and analytics and what's going on for the broader marketing organization. And one of the things that, we as a team are very conscious about, and we want to make sure we set realistic expectations around it, right? If you really want to think about attribution and it is supposed to solve all your problem, you also have to think through what are you using attribution for? That is the fundamental
Mm,
question you have to ask. Because are you using attribution to drive conversions? Are you using attribution to drive optimizations, or are you using attribution to drive increase in engagements, right? All three answers have a different way to look at attribution. So
yep.
that's one of the biggest complexities of it, right? And then, you have all people saying, hey, multi-touch is the way to go, or, first touch and last touch are very rudimentary, but that's not the case. Like a mature organization should have the access and the ability to lean on any one of these attribution techniques, depending on what you're trying to achieve with attribution, right? One of the biggest complications of B2B is really on the paid side of it, right? The paid media side of it, where we spend a lot. It's typically meant to drive a lot of awareness. And if you go into a last touch attribution world, your media will never get the right credit. So the
Right.
fundamental discussion then happens is, oh, maybe we need to cut down the budget, but that's not the right decision, right? If you go into a multi-touch attribution mode again, media does get, because of where it comes in the journey, for most part, it again gets a lower weightage because it's the initial touch point. Was it even the right? It's broad.
Yep.
But then if you're, so I guide my teams to think through it as, what are you trying to achieve? And based on that, use the right framework, right? If the answer is we're trying to justify a budget and the channel is media, I might say let's look at first touch first before we go and look at a multi-touch model, because it is so far and B2B cycles are so long. So
Yep.
you want to be intelligent about it. The second piece of this puzzle is your attribution model is only as good as the data that drives that attribution model, right? So if you don't have, you could have the most sophisticated technology in place to generate an attribution model, but if your data isn't accurate, you're not going to get to the right result. No matter how sophisticated your technology is or your data scientist is and they know how to build, it is not. So foundationally, like for us right now, one of the biggest focus is getting that data model right. And there's multiple reasons for it, right? It starts from the point of data collection to the data ingestion to how we normalize that data to get us to a mechanism of building out an attribution. So two pieces to that puzzle. And a lot of our focus today is really on getting the right interaction data model or behavioral data model from our channels, so we can build out an attribution model which is robust enough to justify and intelligent enough to be used.
So one that I mean that's obviously really very interesting stuff, and I think per my how I introduce this, it's such a great, looking at the strategic imperative of justifying marketing's influence on growth to the tactical way of actually landing those models so that you are successful with that. You know, to really do attribution in the B2B space, account-based resolution is very important, right?
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, our customer is an account, not a person. Have you found, and I know this is an area you know very well from your work at Six Sense, um, do you feel like obviously there's big news earlier in the year around cookie deprecate, cookie
You're
being
moving away
phased
from
out,
it now, so we're
well,
rolling it back. Yes.
yeah, rolling back, whatever they end up doing. But in general, again, where we are today, the future is always hazy, but
Yeah.
where we are today, um, do you feel that you have been able to crack that code of getting reliable account signals? How are you doing it? I'd be curious to hear a little bit about that. We've been doing some interesting work in that space, and it's complex and it's important because all those attribution models rely at the end of the day on a
On that,
reliable account signal.
not just reliable account signal, but it also depends on, like, how you collect data even at the person level. So forget
Yeah.
the account level, you just have to what you collect. So there's two pieces to it. And I think at SAP we are a little bit, I would say, sophisticated on that, right? We have both internal mechanisms to track account signals, and we've done a great job by consolidating a lot of the third party data that we have access to. And there's some in house technologies we have in motion and how to get it to an account level, especially if it's known to you. How do you map it back to an account, right?
Yep.
And then we definitely use um, partners like Sixth Sense to provide us intent data. We look at partners like Bambora to help us with that. So we bring all of that together, we rationalize it in our data ecosystem, and then try to create it. Now, the good thing for us is we also have our own CDP. So we also have our own CDP, and we are in the process of leveraging that for our marketing execution. So we are also trying to build all of that back in our own CDP system with building out the account profile and the data profile, and that product itself has that capability. So that helps us build that story together a bit more.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where we are in that journey. But one thing I would say is if you're looking for a complete account signal, or you get all the, a lot of it is a utopian dream. So
Yeah,
there's
yeah,
never going to
yeah.
be, there's never going to be complete, right? It will
Directional
always,
integrity. This is what we always talk about, directional integrity.
exactly. That's what I tell my team, right? Like this needs to be directionally
Yep.
like accurate. This needs to practically make sense. You might not have, so literally a 360 view of a customer, we love to call it. It's never going to be 360. It might be just 280,
Yeah.
and you just have to get comfortable with that. And this is where that balance of, there's a vision, and then there's a balance of what the reality is and how we build that and stitch that. So I don't claim that we will all anyway have a 360. For us, 360 means what we collect, can we actually associate it with an account or a
Yeah.
contact? And if we can do it, for us, that is 360. Not that we will be ever be able to understand all the engagements that happens, because honestly, people like me who are in the MarTech space, when we are browsing things, nobody will ever know who we are, what we are doing. We would make sure that our information is kept private. So it is. So to me, it's like, what do you consider 360?
Yeah.
Think through it rationally based on the data and the tech you have at your disposal.
Um, I think that's exactly right. The one of the great outputs of the work that you do and have done so well everywhere you've gone is creating a marketing motion that is able to align with sales, right? Because when you bring in that account point of view, you can speak the language, you share a
Of the sales.
currency with the
Yeah.
sales team because you can speak the language of CRM. So maybe I think it'd be interesting to think, the CMO challenges today, because I mean, when you're how do you effect that change? How do you pull it through so that that knowledge that you're accruing in the marketing department is accessible to the sales team? And what ways have you seen change management so that those sales teams are actually enthusiastic and continue to build the habit of working with marketing and not rolling their eyes and saying, "Oh God,"
I think so. I think sales has been chasing marketing alignment forever, and marketing has been chasing sales alignment forever, right? So it's kind of and there's no perfect solution to it. And so I think the way you think through this is, and this is what we talk to our sales teams quite often, right? Like one, obviously, we don't call it as account-based marketing or account-based selling. We call it as account-based experiences, because both sales and marketing have a role to play. It also starts with obviously speaking the language of the account, because sales cares about it, but that doesn't mean sales doesn't care about the contacts in the accounts. They also care about it, because you can't talk to an account, you have to talk to a person, right? So for them also it matters. I think the way we've driven the change, a couple of ways is, we've always, and we are doing this, and it's not that we have it perfect, but we are maturing in that process, is joint planning,
Mm-hmm.
looking at our ICP, the market that we want to go after in a very similar way, making sure that's aligned between sales and marketing, because that's what drives most of the conversation, and then being very clear about where marketing will help and lead the conversations, and using platforms that can also give a single view of the customer, right? So
Yeah.
on our journey of our own internal CDP process, one of the things we have done from the core is the data models that have gone into the CDP, whether it's for contact, whether it's for account, whether it's for interactions, we have ensured that sales and marketing have had an equal say in that data model. Because when you're aligned on that and you have access to similar information or same information as much as possible, then your decisions, if you're sufficiently intelligent, is going to be the same. You're not going to be debating that, right? So one is that. The second piece of the puzzle is, aligned measurement framework, where we talk about the same metrics, having very clear
Yep.
handoffs between sales and marketing. And it's not just a question of handoffs, it's also a question of accountability. How you drive that accountability, like who's responsible, being very clear about that. That has helped us. We are getting there.
Yeah.
If last but not the least, a tops down mandate on aligning sales and marketing is always great, because if it's not tops down, it's also not easy to get it. So I think there's multiple pieces to it. Having done this in many lives now, I call it, what I've seen is the clarity around your ICP, the clarity around your data and your account when you're talking, and the clarity around the handoffs is super, super, super key to drive that change. Ultimately, sales and marketing are trying to do the same thing, which is drive revenue and growth. It doesn't need to be a competition. It should be a collaboration, because one without the other does not really succeed.
Truer words have never been said. um, all right, so let me think. I mean, this has all been so great as expected. You had I had lofty expectations, and you exceed them per usual, Teresa. The All right, but I do. So one last question. You have a very exciting new role at SAP, and you have latitude to answer this however you want, whether it's from your work at SAP or some of the work you've done at Sixth Sense. But if you had to think of something that you had done that you're really proud of, like a win that what give me an example from your work in the last year or so that really brings all this great strategic thinking to life in reality.
So I'm going to talk about, maybe it's too early to call it a win, but I would say I think there are pieces of it which we should consider it win, right? So we've all heard about buying committees,
Oh,
and B2B requires buying committees, and your buying committee size is 8 to 10, or sometimes 16, or sometimes 25. And then the fundamental question is, okay, what is it? How do you make it real? So one of the biggest projects we are doing on an SAP right now across my team, and it's not just across my team, like we've got everybody cross-functionally aligned on a couple of things, right? What do we mean by buying committees? How are we going to develop the concept of buying committees, and how are we going to systematically implement it and use it? So one of the, you're talking about SAP, complex, global, many solutions, to even try and attempt that and get people aligned. And, we've been able to do it. I would not take the credit for it, like saying, oh, yes, my team has been. I think it's been a cross-functional need that we have seen, and getting us to align on it, and also getting to think through what account-based means in the concept of B2B sales and marketing. So I would say, we've not won the war, but there's a lot of battles we've won. So I would consider that a win.
Celebrate. I'm a firm believer you celebrate every little incremental win because yeah, God,
Exactly, for
God
the
forbid you lose the war. At least you had a few good times along the way.
exactly. So we're on that journey. We have the buying committee developed for our core product now, and we're
Yep.
going to extend it to the solutions. But the way we've gone about it, cross-functionally, the way we have combined qualitative and quantitative together to build that approach, the team has been amazing, and I would give kudos to them. It's been amazing to see that journey. So at this moment, if there's something I would call a win from a professional level, this would be the one. I'm proud of it, even though we haven't seen to the end, because of the complexity of the challenge that we're trying to solve for.
Very exciting stuff, Teresa. Well, I will let you get back to changing the world of B2B marketing
Yes.
within SAP and beyond. But I really appreciate you taking this time with us, and I'm sure you and I will talk soon. Thank you.